I'd like to invite Dave Bean, who's Vice President for PCS.
Okay. Thanks, Sean, and obviously bringing as my two colleagues on the platform here, solidarity from PCS to all those on strike today, and all those on picket lines earlier, and all those who tried to give the message to this government that we've not gone away, we are still here. November the 30th is still living and is still growing, and we'll be back in terms of further industrial action in due course, with more and more of us joining together as time goes by. I bring solidarity obviously from my own area. I work in Leicester, and the picket lines there have asked me to make sure that solidarity greetings are given to all of you in the West Midlands, and your fight is their fight. Obviously with Unite, we are proud today to actually see that Unite and PCS members have actually took action and are out together in the Ministry of Defence in the Civil Service as well, and obviously that is a first for us to actually be with Unite in terms of industrial action in the Ministry of Defence. But today has been a massive response from PCS, a massive response in response to the government's proposals on pensions. And in the West Midlands parochially, the reports are that driving tests have been postponed throughout the West Midlands, job centres are closed, courts are cancelling cases, tax inquiry centres are closed, and where they're open they're being staffed by managers, and contact centres are on answer phone, including for those that are here today from the EHRC, who have also been taking industrial action consistently over the last few months in protecting the helpline for the Equality and Human Rights Commission in Birmingham. And I'm glad to see that they're here today with yet another day of industrial action. And where we've had admin staff as well on strike within the prison services, as you've heard already, it's good to see that the prison officers themselves, as have approached those picket lines, have stopped there at those picket lines, have not crossed those picket lines, and have stayed out with their comrades in PCS at protest meetings outside prisons up and down the country. And we welcome that very much, because obviously these are other areas, and police federations, it's been mentioned, there are other areas, BMA coming as well through. There's so much in terms of the anger against the pension proposals that is now growing throughout society, and obviously within the trade union movement. And it's good to share a platform here today with representatives of Unite and UCU. And in the last 12 months I've actually seen so many different activists from so many different unions that, contrary to what Danny Alexander says in terms of our pensions, there is no doubt that the public sector alliances of trade unions is actually fighting against pension attacks, and is still going strong, and will get stronger as the next few weeks and months pass by. Public sector workers are striking today because their pay, their pensions and their jobs are being cut. Not because their pensions are unaffordable, but so that the government can give tax breaks to the super rich and big business. Public sector workers in the civil service, the NHS and the education system together are uniting together today to say that we won't work longer, won't pay more to get a smaller pension. And there are other unions as well, not to forget, in terms of the Northern Ireland Public Sector Association, RMT in some areas, and even what used to be sort of, well, it still is, reasonable right-wing union, the Immigration Service Union, is also out today. So I don't know what the queues are like at Heathrow today. They're probably a week ago, hundreds of thousands of people gave their verdict on the coalition parties at the ballot box, and today hundreds of thousands of people are giving their verdict on picket lines and at rallies. Our pensions are fair, affordable and sustainable. The Hutton report itself demonstrated that the cost of public sector pensions is actually falling and is affordable into the future. So the increases in contributions that we've suffered in the last few weeks actually have demonstrated the fact that the extra money that we are now paying in terms of a pension scheme that isn't yet in force, that extra money is going straight into the Treasury coffers to prop up the big business philosophy of this particular government. And this is further afield, it's also about privatisation as well. the Treasury Minister, Danny Alexander, told Parliament that he was cutting our pensions to make them substantially more affordable to alternative providers. And that's the reality. That is the future, and that is why they're attacking our pensions, to make them cheaper for private industry and come and take our jobs off of us and our children's jobs away from the public sector. PCS wants fair pensions for all, whether public, private or state pension. We don't want a race to the bottom as advocated by this government. We want fair pensions for all. Cutting public sector pensions will do nothing for the private sector schemes. Companies have abandoned their pension responsibilities, meaning only 1/3 of private sector workers have a workplace pension scheme. Some private sector areas, though, I've got to be honest, are actually doing quite well in terms of pensions. The average value of a FTSE 100 director's total pension currently stands at 3.4 million. And for chief executives, that figure actually rises to 5.6 million. So there are some in the private sector that are doing quite well. But obviously we know who they are, and we know it's not the workers that are employed by their companies. We also have one of the worst basic state pensions in Europe, and it's a fact that only Cyprus, Latvia and Estonia have worse state pension provisions than the UK, and that is an absolute disgrace. And yet they still want us to work to the age of 68 to get it. Low-paid workers cannot afford to retire early and will die earlier as a result, and this is an attack, as has been said, on the low pay. We say 68 is too late, whether for public pensions, private pensions or the state pension. And a campaign of 68 is too late has been launched this week with PCS Unite and the NUT, and obviously that message will be promoted through our campaigning work on pensions in the weeks and months to come. Unions have tried to negotiate, but the government has refused to discuss any of the key issues at stake. Under current proposals, parochially, a PCS member would pay an extra £63 a month, lose up to 20% of the value of their pension and have to retire up to 8 years longer. That is for the average civil servant. The average PCS member working in the civil service has a public sector pension of just £4,200 a year, equivalent to £80 per week. That is not an affordable pension. It's certainly not gold-plated, as you are led to believe. Our members work for low wages. The only thing that keeps them sustainable is a pension at the end of their working lives, which is being robbed and thieved from them. In 2006, unions coordinated their ballots and balloted members while the talks with the then Labour government were ongoing. That threat at that time actually got the government to negotiate seriously, and we actually found that strike action wasn't necessary. And we agreed a settlement that at the time the Cabinet Minister Alan Johnson described as fair and reasonable. That settlement remains not only fair and reasonable, but affordable and sustainable. And PCS calls upon Ed Miliband, who will probably cross PCS picket lines this afternoon in the Houses of Westminster, but we call upon Ed Miliband to defend the agreement that his Labour Party in power negotiated with the unions and not take the coalition government side and defend the pension agreement that his party made with them. And if this government continues to refuse to negotiate, we will be on strike again next month. In PCS, an overtime ban starts tomorrow and lasts to the middle of July. An overtime ban supplemented by further action in sectoral areas within PCS. We're working with other unions to organise a mass march against austerity, and Unite have actually promoted that through the TUC, not actually received the best possible response just yet, but PCS is supporting that call for another major demonstration against the cuts and against the austerity measures that this government is putting forward. Because PCS actually does believe that there is an alternative. We do actually believe that a properly resourced public service, putting more money into social areas such as social housing and areas such as that, not renewing Trident and areas of that ilk, and to close the tax gap, which currently stands at a mind-boggling £120 billion in tax that's avoided, evaded or simply not paid. And that is by mainly the rich in this country. So even though they may get increased bonuses, Whatever their reduction in tax rate is, they're still avoiding their tax by moving those bonuses offshore, and they're evading tax and they're not paying tax. At the end of the day, that tax gap should be closed down completely, give proper resources to HMRC to actually tackle that tax gap. And if we can do that, then there will be no need for cuts at all, wherever in the public sector. So let's send a message to the government today. Unless you stop your attacks on jobs, pay and pensions and local services, you will face more marches, more campaigning, more protests and more strikes. We won't sit back while everything we've ever worked for is taken away from us. And PCS met this pledge today, as it has in the past and will into the future. We are not going away, and the fight against these attacks on our pensions will grow and grow and grow. Thank you for listening. Solidarity.